The rain was merciless. Cecilia Ashford ran through the cobblestone streets of Mayfair, her ivory wedding gown dragging behind her like a wounded ghost. The silk, once pristine and perfect, now clung to her legs in heavy, sodden folds. Her breath came in sharp gasps, her lungs burning with every step. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't go back. Behind her, the church bells had fallen silent. The guests would be murmuring by now, shocked whispers behind gloved hands, scandalized eyes following her empty place at the altar. Her mother would be weeping, her father would be furious, and Lord Edmund Hartley, her groom, the man she had been promised to since she was 17, would be standing there with that cold, entitled smile, as if her rebellion were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She ran faster. Before we go on, tell me in the comments, do you also love emotional stories like this one? And where are you watching from? Don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel and shows that you want more stories like this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. Now, take a deep breath and come with me, because what happens next will give you chills. A sharp turn, another street. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the rooftops, drowning out the world. Her vision swam with water and tears she refused to shed. She had made her choice. There was no turning back. And then, the thunder of hooves. A carriage appeared from nowhere, black as midnight, cutting through the rain like a blade. It stopped directly in her path, so abruptly that she stumbled backward, nearly falling. The horses stamped and snorted, their breath rising in clouds. The door swung open. Cecilia froze. A man stepped down, tall, dark-haired, impeccably dressed despite the weather, his greatcoat unbuttoned and flaring behind him like wings. His eyes, steel grey and unreadable, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. No, not him. Anyone but him. Get in. His voice was low, commanding, edged with something she couldn't name. It wasn't a request. Cecilia took a step back, water streaming down her face. You, Lord Adrian Blackwood, the man who had destroyed her family's name 3 years ago, the man who had stood in Parliament and accused her father of fraud, of deceit, of crimes that had left the Ashford reputation in ruins, the man she had sworn to hate for the rest of her life. I said get in. His hand remained extended, palm up, steady despite the rain. I would rather drown in this street than accept help from you. Something flickered across his face, too fast to catch. Pain? Regret? It vanished before she could be sure. Then drown. He didn't move, didn't lower his hand. But do it after you're out of sight. In 5 minutes, half of London will come looking for the runaway bride, and when they find you here, soaked and shivering like a lost child, they will drag you back to that church. Is that what you want? Cecilia's jaw tightened. She hated that he was right, hated the logic in his words, hated the way her body was already shaking from cold and exhaustion. Why? Her voice broke despite herself. Why are you here? His gaze didn't waver. Because I was at the church. Her breath caught. You were watching? I was ensuring you didn't make the worst mistake of your life. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his dark hair, his eyes blazing with something fierce and unyielding. And when I saw you run, I knew you'd finally found your courage. Don't waste it now. Thunder cracked overhead. Cecilia stood there, trembling, torn between pride and survival, between hatred and the inexplicable pull of his presence. She thought of Edmund's cold hands, of her mother's desperate pleas, of the life she was supposed to live, small, silent, suffocating. She looked at Adrian's outstretched hand and took it. The moment their fingers touched, something shifted. A spark, a shock. He pulled her into the carriage with startling gentleness, as if she were made of glass. The door closed, the driver snapped the reins, and London disappeared into the rain behind them. Inside the carriage, silence settled like a living thing. Cecilia pressed herself against the far corner, her wet gown pooling around her feet. Adrian sat across from her, his expression unreadable once more, his hands resting on his knees. She refused to look at him, but she could feel his gaze, steady, burning, impossible to ignore. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered. "Somewhere safe. I don't trust you." "I know." The carriage rattled on through the storm, and Cecilia realized with a chill that had nothing to do with the rain that she had just placed her entire fate in the hands of the one man she had vowed to despise forever. The estate appeared through the mist like something from a dream or a nightmare. Blackwood Manor. Cecilia had heard of it, of course. Everyone in London had. The ancestral seat of the Blackwood family perched on the edge of the city like a sleeping beast. Vast, imposing, surrounded by ancient oaks and iron gates that seemed designed to keep the world out, or to keep something in. The carriage rolled to a stop before the main entrance. Adrian descended first, then turned to offer his hand. Cecilia hesitated, her instinct still to refuse him, to maintain the hatred that had sustained her through 3 years of social ruin, but her body betrayed her. She was shaking violently now, her teeth chattering, her gown a freezing second skin. She took his hand. He led her inside without a word. The entrance hall was breathtaking. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, a grand staircase that curved upward into shadow. But there was something melancholy about it too. A house too large, too empty, as if it were mourning its own grandeur. "Mrs. Dawson?" Adrian's voice echoed through the space. An older woman appeared, grey-haired and sharp-eyed, her expression shifting from surprise to swift efficiency in an instant. "My lord, prepare the east chamber, hot water, warm clothes, something to eat." His tone was clipped, precise. Then he glanced at Cecilia, and his voice softened, just barely. "She's been through enough." Mrs. Dawson's gaze flicked between them, questions clearly forming, but she was too well trained to voice them. She nodded briskly. "At once, my lord." Cecilia stood dripping on the marble floor, feeling utterly exposed. Her wedding gown, once a symbol of her future, now felt like a costume from someone else's life. Adrian removed his greatcoat and stepped toward her. She flinched. He stopped. Something painful crossed his face. Without a word, he draped the coat over her shoulders, careful not to touch her, and stepped back. "You'll catch your death standing there. Perhaps that would be preferable," she said bitterly. "Don't." His voice was suddenly sharp, cutting. "Don't say things like that." She looked up, startled by the raw edge in his tone. For the first time since entering the carriage, she truly looked at him. His jaw was tight, his hands were clenched at his sides, and his eyes, those steel-grey eyes, held something she hadn't expected: anguish. Before she could speak, Mrs. Dawson returned. "This way, miss." Cecilia let herself be led upstairs, too exhausted to protest the title. Miss, not Lady Hartley. She would never be Lady Hartley now. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, she felt only relief. An hour later, she sat before a roaring fire in a guest chamber, wrapped in a borrowed dressing gown of deep green velvet. Her hair hung loose and drying over her shoulders. A tray of soup and bread sat untouched on the table beside her. She couldn't eat, couldn't think. She had fled her wedding, destroyed her reputation, entered the home of her family's greatest enemy, and yet she felt more alive than she had in years. A knock at the door. "Come in." Adrian entered, and she noticed he had changed as well. Simpler clothes now, dark trousers, and a white shirt open at the collar. He looked younger somehow, less the villain of her nightmares, more human. He didn't sit. He stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the rain that still poured endlessly. "You were at the church," she said quietly. "Why?" A long silence. "Because I couldn't stay away." Her heart stuttered. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He turned then, and the firelight caught his face, illuminating every sharp angle, every shadow. "I told myself I wouldn't interfere, that you had made your choice, that it was none of my concern if you married Edmund Hartley. Then why did you?" "Because I knew." His voice dropped, rough and raw. "I knew you didn't love him. I saw it in your face when the banns were announced. I saw it every time I passed you in society, and you looked through me like I was a ghost." He took a step closer. "And I couldn't let you tie yourself to a man who would break you." Cecilia stood, her hands trembling. "You have no right." "I know. You destroyed my family." "I know. You let the world think we were criminals. You stood in Parliament and—" "I know." The words tore from him, echoing through the chamber. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "God, Cecilia, do you think I don't know? Do you think I don't see your hatred every time you look at me?" She froze. He had never said her name before, not once. In all these years, it sounded different in his voice, like a prayer, like a confession. "Then why?" Her voice broke. "Why did you do it?" He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked dangerously like despair. "Because the alternative was worse." What could possibly be worse than what you did? The truth. The word hung between them like a blade. Cecilia felt her breath catch. What truth? But Adrian was already moving toward the door, his walls slamming back into place. "You should rest. Tomorrow, we'll discuss what comes next." "Adrian," he stopped, his hand on the doorframe. His shoulders were rigid, his head bowed. "Please," she whispered, "tell me." For a moment she thought he might. She saw the war playing out across his face, the desire to speak warring with something deeper, darker. Then he straightened. "Good night, Cecilia." The door closed softly behind him, and she was left standing in the firelight, her heart pounding, her mind racing with a single impossible thought. What if I've been wrong about him all along? Cecilia couldn't sleep. She lay in the enormous four-poster bed, staring at the canopy above, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Adrian's face, the anguish, the restraint, the way he had said her name as if it cost him something. Because the alternative was worse. What had he meant? What truth could possibly justify what he had done? Her father had never recovered from the scandal. The accusations of fraud, of embezzlement, of deals made in shadows. They had stripped him of his position, his dignity, his will to fight. He had died 2 years later, a broken man. And her mother had blamed Adrian Blackwood with every breath. Cecilia had grown up on that hatred, had nursed it, had let it define her. But now, lying in his home, wrapped in his hospitality, haunted by the look in his eyes, she wasn't sure of anything anymore. The clock struck 3. She rose, pulling the velvet dressing gown tighter around herself, and slipped into the hallway. The house was silent, vast and sleeping. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting everything in silver and shadow. She didn't know what she was looking for. She only knew she couldn't lie still any longer. Her feet carried her down the grand staircase, past portraits of stern-faced Blackwood ancestors, into a wing she hadn't seen before. A door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the gap. A study. She shouldn't. She knew she shouldn't, but her hand was already pushing the door open. The room was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk covered in papers, a fireplace still glowing with embers. And there, on the desk, illuminated by a single lamp, was a leather portfolio. Cecilia's heart pounded as she approached. The portfolio was old, well-worn, the kind meant for important documents. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Letters, dozens of them. Some finished, some crossed out, some begun and abandoned, all in the same bold, masculine hand, all addressed to her. "My dearest Cecilia." She stopped breathing. "I don't know if I'll ever send this. I don't know if you would read it if I did. But I must write it, if only to preserve my sanity." The date at the top, 3 years ago, just after the scandal. Her hands shook as she read on. "By the time you read this, if you ever do, you will have heard the accusations. You will believe me a villain. Your family will curse my name. Society will celebrate my victory and mourn your fall. Let them. What they don't know, what they can never know, is that I did not expose your father's crimes. I covered for them." Cecilia's breath caught in her throat. "Your father was not the architect of the fraud, Cecilia. He was a pawn. Lord Pemberton and his associates used your father's name, his seal, his reputation to conduct dealings that would have destroyed half of London's financial institutions. When I discovered the truth, I had a choice: expose Pemberton and his circle, which would have dragged your family through a scandal so vicious that no one, not your mother, not you, not your brother, would have survived it intact. The shame would have been absolute, the consequences unthinkable. Or I could take the evidence I had, present a portion of it, enough to satisfy Parliament's need for a scapegoat, and accept your family's hatred in exchange for their survival. I chose the latter. I let the world think your father guilty of minor infractions while burying the evidence of Pemberton's true crimes. I used my family's influence to ensure the penalties remained financial, not criminal, and I endured your eyes, those beautiful, furious eyes, looking at me as if I were the devil himself. It was the easiest bargain I've ever made." Cecilia's vision blurred. Tears spilled onto the page, smudging the ink. "I would do it again, 1,000 times. I would let you hate me forever if it meant you were safe. If it meant you could walk through society with your head high, even if you could not speak to me, even if you could not bear to look at me. I have loved you since the moment I saw you at Lady Ashford's ball when you were 18, and I was a fool, too proud to speak. I have loved you through every cold glance, every turned shoulder, every moment you've looked through me as if I didn't exist, and I will love you still, in silence, until my last breath. Yours, though you'll never know it, Adrian." The letter fell from her hands. Cecilia stood frozen, her entire world tilting on its axis. Everything she had believed, every moment of hatred, every bitter thought, had been built on a lie. Not his lie, her own. He had saved them. He had sacrificed himself. and she had hated him for it. A sound behind her, a sharp intake of breath. She spun around. Adrian stood in the doorway, still dressed, his face pale in the lamplight. He looked at the scattered letters, at her tear-stained face, and something in him seemed to break. "How, you weren't supposed to see those?" His voice was hollow. "Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wouldn't have changed anything." He stepped into the room, his movements slow, careful, as if approaching something wild. "Your father still died in disgrace, your family still suffered. Knowing the truth would only have added guilt to your grief. You let me hate you. Yes. You let the world think you a monster. Yes. Why?" He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and she saw it all. The years of silence, the weight of secrets, the love he had carried like a cross, because it was easier than watching you hate yourself. Cecilia couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The distance between them felt simultaneously vast and impossibly small. "Adrian, don't." He held up a hand, his control visibly fraying. "Don't pity me, Cecilia. I don't want your guilt or your gratitude. I made my choice. I live with it. That's not what I—" She took a step toward him. "You wrote that you loved me." He went perfectly still. "That was private. You wrote that you've loved me for years." "Cecilia, is it true?" The question hung in the air between them, fragile and dangerous. Adrian's jaw worked, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Every word. Her heart shattered and reformed in the same instant. "Then why—" Her voice broke. "Why did you let me go to that church today? Why didn't you stop me before?" "Because you deserve more than a man society calls a villain." He turned away, his shoulders rigid. "You deserve someone who can give you the life you were meant for, not— You don't get to decide what I deserve." He stopped. Cecilia moved closer, her bare feet silent on the carpet. She could see the tension in every line of his body, the war he was fighting within himself. "You saved my family," she said softly. "You carried that burden alone. You let me hate you to protect me from the truth." She reached out, her hand hovering near his shoulder. "And you think that makes you unworthy? It makes me a liar. It makes you the most honorable man I've ever known." He turned then, so quickly she gasped. His eyes blazed with something fierce and desperate. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm not. I'm finally seeing you for who you are." "And who is that?" She stepped closer, until she could feel the heat radiating from him, until there were only inches between them. "The man I should have trusted. The man who has been protecting me all along." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The man I think I've been fighting so hard not to see, because seeing him would mean admitting I was wrong." "Cecilia." Her name was a warning, a plea. "Tell me again." She looked up at him, her heart in her throat. "Tell me what you wrote in that letter. Don't ask me to do this. Tell me." "I can't." "Adrian, because if I say it now while you're here, while you're looking at me like that—" His control finally snapped. He reached up, his hand cupping her face with devastating gentleness. "I won't be able to let you go." And Cecilia realized, with sudden, crystalline clarity, that she didn't want him to. "Then don't." The words left her lips before she could stop them, before doubt could creep in, before the weight of propriety and scandal and everything she was supposed to be could silence her. Adrian's hand trembled against her cheek. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She covered his hand with hers, holding it there. "I ran from that church today because I couldn't marry a man I didn't love, a man who saw me as nothing more than an ornament for his name." Her voice strengthened. "But you've seen me. You've protected me, even when I hated you for it." "Cecilia, I was wrong about you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I was so wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry." "No." The word was fierce. He pulled her closer, his other hand coming to rest on her waist. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. I chose this path. I knew what it would cost. It shouldn't have cost you everything." "It didn't." His thumb traced her cheekbone, wiping away her tears. "You're here, you're safe, that's all that matters." "That's not all that matters." Her hands found his chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath her palms. "What about what you want? What about what you need?" His eyes darkened. "What I want is dangerous. Tell me anyway." "Cecilia, please." The word broke something in him. She saw it happen, saw the careful walls he'd built around himself crack and crumble. His forehead dropped to hers, his breath ragged. "I want you." The confession was raw, torn from somewhere deep. "I've wanted you for so long that I don't remember what it feels like not to ache with it. I want to wake up every morning and see you in my home, I want to hear you laugh without that careful politeness you show the world. I want—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "What?" she whispered. "What else?" "I want to deserve you." His voice cracked. "And I never will." "You're wrong." "I'm not. You're meant for ballrooms and titles and—" She kissed him. It wasn't tentative, wasn't uncertain. It was a decision, a choosing, a line crossed that could never be uncrossed. For a heartbeat, Adrian went rigid with shock. Then he made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a surrender, and kissed her back, and the world caught fire. His hands tangled in her hair, hers gripped his shirt. The kiss deepened, desperate and searching, as if they were both trying to make up for years of distance in a single moment. She tasted salt, tears, his or hers, she didn't know, didn't care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness," he whispered. "I know. You'll be ruined, completely. I was already ruined the moment I ran from that church. Cecilia, unless you don't want this." She pulled back slightly, suddenly uncertain. "Unless I've misread." He kissed her again, harder this time, more certain. When he spoke, his lips still brushed hers. "I have wanted this, wanted you, since the moment I first saw you. Every day since has been an exercise in restraint." His hands framed her face. "But I need you to be sure. Because if you choose this, if you choose me, there's no going back. Society will turn on you. Your family will disown you. The life you knew will be gone." She looked at him, really looked, at the man who had sacrificed everything to protect her, who had carried his love in silence for years, who even now was giving her a way out. "I don't want that life anymore," she said clearly. "I want this one. I want you." Something fierce and tender blazed in his eyes. "You'll marry me, properly, not because you have to, but because I choose to." She smiled through her tears. "Yes, Adrian, yes." He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent, as if she were something precious he'd been given permission to hold. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "I won't be able to give you the life you had," he warned. "The society you knew will close its doors. I don't want their doors." She traced his jaw with her fingertips. "I want yours. You'll have it." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You'll have everything I am, everything I have, for as long as you'll have me. That might be quite a long time. Promise?" "I promise." The rain had stopped. They stood together in his study as dawn began to break beyond the windows, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Adrian had wrapped her in his arms, and Cecilia had rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now?" His lips brushed her hair. "Now we face the storm. Your family will come looking for you. Hartley will demand explanations. Society will condemn us both." "You make it sound so cheerful." She felt his chest rumble with quiet laughter, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. "I've faced worse." "Have you?" "No," he admitted. "But I've also never had anything worth fighting for before." He tilted her chin up, his eyes serious. "I won't let them hurt you, Cecilia. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," she repeated, and the word felt like a vow. They stayed like that as the sun rose, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way, at the most impossible time. The world beyond those walls would be merciless, but for this moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they were safe. They were home. A knock at the study door shattered the peace. Mrs. Dawson's voice, tight with urgency. "My lord, there are carriages approaching, several of them." Adrian's arms tightened around Cecilia. "How many?" "At least 5. They'll be at the gates within minutes." Cecilia's heart lurched. "My family, and likely Hartley." Adrian stepped back, his expression hardening into something resolved. "It's time." "Time for what?" He looked at her, and despite the gravity of the moment, he smiled. Really smiled, warm and devastating. "Time for me to ask your family for your hand. Properly this time. They'll refuse. I know. They'll threaten you. I'm counting on it." "Adrian," he cupped her face, his touch gentle despite the steel in his voice. "I told you, Cecilia, I've waited years for you. I can handle a few angry lords and a jilted groom." His thumb traced her bottom lip. "The question is, are you ready?" She thought of Edmund Hartley's cold hands, of her mother's expectations, of the suffocating life she'd almost accepted as inevitable. Then she looked at Adrian, at the man who had loved her in silence, who had sacrificed everything for her protection, who even now was prepared to stand between her and the world. "I've never been more ready in my life." "Then let's give them something to be scandalized about." He took her hand, properly, deliberately, as if claiming her before witnesses, and led her toward the entrance hall. The storm was about to break, but this time They would face it together. The entrance hall of Blackwood Manor had never felt so much like a battlefield. Cecilia stood beside Adrian at the top of the grand staircase, her hand firmly clasped in his, as the doors burst open below. The morning light flooded in, harsh and unforgiving, illuminating the figures that stormed across the threshold. Her mother came first, Lady Margaret Ashford, still in her wedding finery, her face a mask of fury and devastation. Behind her, Cecilia's brother, Thomas, red-faced and trembling with rage. And then, like a dark spectre, Lord Edmund Hartley himself, his expression cold enough to freeze blood. They were followed by half a dozen others, relatives, witnesses, people who had come to watch the spectacle of her downfall. "Cecilia!" Her mother's voice cracked like a whip. "Come down here this instant!" Adrian's hand tightened on hers, a subtle warning, a silent promise, "I'm here." Together they descended the stairs. The crowd parted as they approached, whispers hissing through the air like snakes. Cecilia kept her chin high, her spine straight. She would not cower, not anymore. "Mother," she said quietly. Lady Margaret's hand flew up as if to strike her, but Thomas caught her wrist. His eyes, when they met Cecilia's, were filled with something worse than anger, disappointment. "What have you done?" he whispered. Before Cecilia could answer, Hartley stepped forward. His gaze raked over her borrowed dressing gown, her loose hair, the intimate way Adrian stood beside her. His lip curled. "I see." His voice was silk over steel. "The runaway bride has found herself a new patron. How convenient." "Watch your tongue, Hartley." Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. "Or what, Blackwood?" Hartley smiled, cruel and knowing. "You'll ruin me the way you ruined her family? We all know what you're capable of." "Edmund, please!" Lady Margaret reached toward him, desperate. "She's confused, distraught. Whatever has happened here, it can be undone. The wedding can still take place. We can salvage this." "Salvage?" Hartley laughed, bitter and sharp. "Your daughter fled our wedding, spent the night in another man's home, and you think this can be salvaged?" He turned his cold gaze on Cecilia. "You've made your choice, Miss Ashford, and now you'll live with the consequences. She's not Miss Ashford anymore." Adrian's words fell like stones into still water. The room went silent. "What did you say?" Thomas stepped forward, his hand moving toward his hip, toward where a gentleman might carry a weapon. Adrian didn't flinch. "I said she's not Miss Ashford. She will be Lady Blackwood. I intend to marry her." Chaos erupted. Lady Margaret swayed as if she might faint. Thomas lunged forward, but two of his companions held him back. Hartley's face went white with fury. "For you arrogant—" Thomas's voice shook. "You destroy our family, drag our name through the mud, and now you think you can take our sister. I'm not taking anyone." Adrian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I'm offering her a choice, something none of you have ever done." "A choice?" Lady Margaret's voice rose to a shriek. "What choice does she have now? You've ruined her. She spent the night here, unchaperoned in your home." "Nothing happened," Cecilia said clearly. Every eye turned to her. "Nothing happened," she repeated, stronger now. "Lord Blackwood offered me shelter from the storm. He gave me a room, dry clothes and safety. Nothing more." She met her mother's gaze. "He treated me with more respect in one night than Edmund has shown me in 3 years of courtship." Hartley's face darkened. "You ungrateful—" "Don't." Adrian moved, placing himself between Cecilia and Hartley. "Don't finish that sentence." "Or what?" Hartley sneered. "You'll call me out? Challenge me? Please do, Blackwood. Give me the excuse." "Gentlemen," Mrs. Dawson's voice, sharp and authoritative, came from the doorway. She held a silver tray with a single envelope. "A message has just arrived from the Archbishop." The room stilled. Adrian took the envelope, broke the seal, read. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, then grim satisfaction. "What is it?" Thomas demanded. Adrian looked up, his gaze finding Cecilia's. "A special license, already approved and sealed. I sent the request yesterday evening." He paused. "We can be married within the hour." The silence was deafening. "Yesterday?" Lady Margaret's voice was faint. "You sent for it yesterday, but you didn't even— She hadn't even— I've known for 3 years that I would marry her." Adrian's voice was steady, certain. The only question was whether she would have me. All eyes turned to Cecilia, her mother pleading silently, her brother furious and betrayed, Hartley radiating cold contempt, and a dozen others watching, waiting, hungry for scandal. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything. She could go back, apologize, beg forgiveness. Perhaps, with enough pleading, enough humiliation, she could salvage some scrap of her old life. Marry Hartley eventually, or someone like him. Live quietly, carefully, never drawing attention again, or she could step forward, take Adrian's hand, accept the scandal, the whispers, the exile from everything she'd known. She looked at Adrian, at the man who had loved her in silence, who had sacrificed his reputation to save her family, who even now was offering her not just marriage, but freedom. The choice had never been clearer. Yes, the word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Yes, Lady Margaret whispered. Cecilia turned to face them all. Yes, I will marry Lord Blackwood. Today, within the hour, if he'll have me. Cecilia, no. Thomas reached for her. I'm sorry, Thomas. Her voice broke, but she didn't waver. I'm sorry I'm not the daughter Mother wanted. I'm sorry I can't be the sister who makes the perfect match. But I won't apologize for choosing my own happiness. Happiness? Hartley's laugh was ugly. You think he'll make you happy? A man who destroyed your family. He saved my family. She met his gaze steadily. And he saved me from you. Hartley's face went purple with rage. You'll regret this, both of you. I'll make certain you'll do nothing. Adrian's voice was soft, lethal. Because if you attempt to harm her, if you even speak her name with anything less than respect, I will take every secret your family has buried, every questionable dealing your father has made, and I will drag them into the light of day. He smiled, cold and dangerous. Test me, Hartley. Please. Hartley stared at him, something like fear flickering across his face. Then he turned on his heel and strode from the house, his footsteps echoing like gunshots. Lady Margaret was weeping now, quiet and broken. You're choosing him over your family? I'm choosing myself, Mother. Cecilia's voice gentled. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what I want, what I need. She paused. I hope someday you'll understand. But even if you don't, I have to do this. Her mother looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned away, unable or unwilling to watch anymore. Thomas lingered, his jaw working. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse. If he hurts you, he won't. If he does, I'll kill him. He looked at Adrian, the threat clear. Remember that. Adrian nodded, accepting the warning. I will. And then they were gone. All of them. Leaving nothing but echoes and the wreckage of her old life scattered across the marble floor. Cecilia stood in the sudden silence, trembling. Adrian turned to her, his hands finding hers. Are you all right? I don't know. She laughed, shaky and breathless. I just chose scandal over safety, exile over approval. She looked up at him, her eyes bright. I think I might be terrified. Good. He pulled her close, his arms coming around her. So am I. Liar. It's true. His lips brushed her temple. I'm terrified I won't be enough, that you'll wake up one day and regret this, that I can't give you the life you deserve. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. The life I deserve is the one I choose, and I choose you, even knowing what it will cost. Especially knowing that, she smiled. Now, didn't you say something about a wedding within the hour? His eyes darkened with emotion. Love, relief, wonder. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything. He kissed her then, deep and sure and full of promise. When they broke apart, Mrs. Dawson was standing in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. Shall I send for the vicar, my lord? Adrian didn't look away from Cecilia. Yes, and Mrs. Dawson? My lord? Prepare the master chambers. My wife will be staying. 2 years later, Blackwood Manor, Scottish Highlands. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the drawing room, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Cecilia sat in her favorite chair, an overstuffed thing upholstered in deep green velvet that Adrian had insisted on purchasing the moment he'd seen her admire it in an Edinburgh shop, with her hands resting on the swell of her belly. 8 months. The physician had said the baby would come any day now. She smiled, feeling the familiar flutter of movement beneath her palms. Strong kicks, insistent, just like their father. Restless again. Adrian's voice, warm and amused, came from the doorway. She looked up to find him leaning against the frame, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, his dark hair slightly disheveled. He'd been working in the gardens again. Their gardens, wild and beautiful, nothing like the manicured perfection of London estates. Very restless, she said. I think we're going to have a fighter. Takes after her mother, then. He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, his hand covering hers on her belly. His eyes, those steel-grey eyes that had once seemed so cold, were soft with wonder. Her? Cecilia raised an eyebrow. You're still convinced it's a girl? I know it is. He pressed a kiss to her stomach. Eleanor Margaret Blackwood, named for both our mothers. Cecilia's throat tightened. Her mother had never forgiven her for the scandal, had never responded to any of the letters Cecilia had sent over the past 2 years, but Adrian had insisted on the gesture anyway. A bridge offered, even if it was never crossed. And if it's a boy, then we'll try again. He grinned up at her, boyish and unguarded in a way he only ever was with her. And again, until our house is full of dark-haired terrors who refuse to follow any of society's rules. She laughed, threading her fingers through his hair. You make it sound like chaos. It will be. He rose, settling beside her in the chair. They'd learned early in their marriage that no chair was too small when they wanted to be close. And it will be perfect. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint patterns across the floor. Beyond the windows, the highland landscape stretched wild and endless, mountains and moors and sky that went on forever. This was their kingdom now. Not London with its whispers and judgment, not the ballrooms that had closed their doors, but this wild, beautiful corner of the world where they'd built something entirely their own. Do you ever miss it? Adrian asked quietly. The life you had before? It wasn't the first time he'd asked. In the early months of their marriage, when the scandal had been fresh and raw, when the invitations had stopped coming and old friends had turned away, he'd asked it often, as if waiting for her to regret, to realize what she'd given up. No, she said simply, not even a little. Cecilia, I mean it. She turned in his arms to face him properly. That life was beautiful on the surface, all those gowns and parties and perfect manners, but it was empty, Adrian. I was empty. She took his hand, pressed it to her heart. Here, I'm full. Here, I'm free. Here, I'm alive. His eyes glistened. Even after 2 years, he still looked at her sometimes, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real, as if she might disappear. I love you, he said, rough and fierce. God, Cecilia, I love you so much it terrifies me. Good. She kissed him softly. Because I love you too, and you're stuck with me now, forever, at least that long. A sound from outside, bright, joyful laughter. They both turned to the window. In the garden below, a small figure was running through the wildflowers, her dark curls bouncing, her little dress splashed with mud and grass stains. Diana, their daughter, 3 years old, named for the goddess of the hunt because from the moment she could walk, she'd refused to be contained. Mrs. Dawson followed at a more sedate pace, shaking her head but smiling. The older woman had become more than a housekeeper. She was family, the grandmother their children would actually know. She's going to be impossible when the baby comes, Adrian said, but his voice was full of fondness. She's already impossible. Cecilia watched their daughter attempt to catch a butterfly, stumbling and laughing when it flew away. She's perfect. Adrian stood, offering her his hand. Come on before she discovers the pond again. Cecilia let him help her up, no easy feat these days, and together they walked to the garden entrance. The moment Diana saw them, she shrieked with delight and came running, launching herself at Adrian's legs. Papa, Papa, I found a frog. Did you? He scooped her up, settling her on his hip despite the mud. Where is this magnificent frog? I let him go. Mama says we must be kind to small things. Mama is very wise. Diana turned her bright eyes, Cecilia's eyes, on her mother. Mama, is the baby coming soon? I want to meet them. Cecilia stroked her daughter's cheek. Very soon, darling. Will they play with me? Eventually. But first they'll need to grow a little. Diana considered this seriously. Then she nodded, satisfied, and squirmed to be put down. She was off again in an instant, chasing after something only she could see. Adrian's arm came around Cecilia's waist, supporting her weight as they walked slowly through the garden. The late summer air was sweet with the scent of roses and lavender. Bees hummed in the flower beds. In the distance, the mountains rose like ancient guardians. Are you happy? Cecilia asked softly. Adrian stopped walking. He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands, his expression so tender it made her heart ache. Every single day, he said. Every moment I wake up and you're beside me. Every time I hear Diana laugh, every time I feel our child move. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You gave me a life I never thought I deserved. A family, a home, not just a house, but a home. You gave me the same thing. She covered his hands with hers. You gave me freedom, choice, love without conditions. Always, he promised, for as long as I breathe. She kissed him there in the garden, with the sun warm on their faces and their daughter's laughter echoing through the air. When they pulled apart, both smiling, Diana had appeared beside them, tugging on Adrian's sleeve. Papa, will you push me on the swing? Of course, little bird. He looked at Cecilia. Will you be all right? "I'll sit right here and watch." She gestured to a nearby bench. "Go, make our daughter shriek with joy." He kissed her once more, quick and sweet, then let Diana drag him toward the rope swing he'd built from an old oak tree. Cecilia settled on the bench, one hand on her belly, and watched her family. Adrian pushed the swing higher and higher, while Diana squealed with delight, fearless and free. Mrs. Dawson emerged with tea and biscuits, clucking about rest and the baby. The late afternoon stretched golden and perfect around them. This was not the life she'd been raised for, not the glittering ballrooms and strategic marriages and careful propriety of London society. This was better. This was real. And as she sat there, feeling their second child move within her, watching her husband and daughter play in the wild Scottish garden they'd created together, Cecilia knew with absolute certainty she had made the right choice. She had fled the altar, and she had found everything.